I'd been working at a diner on the main street where I live for 2 years. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills. I like the atmosphere. It's a cozy old-fashioned diner with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that plays 50s music. Most of the customers are regulars who come in for breakfast or lunch. I've gotten to know many of them pretty well, but there's one customer who really creeps me out. He's a middle-aged man who comes in by himself and always sits at the counter. He wears a leather jacket and ripped jeans pretty much every day. He doesn't say much, but he always stares at me with a really weird intensity. I try to avoid him as much as possible, but sometimes he'll ask me for something, and I'll have to approach him. I didn't think much of him at first. I've dealt with my fair share of creepy guys in my life. Things were normal for a while. It was really just a bad feeling. In fact, I thought I was being too judgmental at first. But one night, I saw his car drive by my house late. It was a beaten-up old sedan. I can't remember the actual model. I still lived with my parents at the time, so at least I had them there. I was sitting in the living room watching TV, and I saw a car crawl by my house at a snail's pace. Sometimes it would circle around and come back. It was like he was watching me. It became impossible to ignore. My mom and dad noticed it too. One night I was getting ready for bed when I heard a car pull into our driveway. I looked out the window, and it was the one from before. What was he doing here? I ran over to my parents' room. I found my dad and told him what was going on. He went outside to confront the guy while I called the police. I watched from the window as my dad walked up to the man's car. The man rolled down his window, and I could hear him shouting at my dad. I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, but it was something about how I was leading him on. My dad kept his cool, though. He didn't raise his voice or get aggressive. He just calmly asked the man to leave and never come back. That's when things took a turn for the worse. The man suddenly hit the gas pedal and tried to run over my dad with his car. My heart nearly stopped. I thought my dad was going to get run over right in front of me, but somehow he managed to get out of the way at the last second. The car slammed into our house and put a large dent into the vinyl siding. One of the car's headlights smashed and left a trail of broken glass as he backed out. The man sped off down the street. My dad was standing there in disbelief. Police arrived a few minutes later. We talked to them for a while, and then we showed them the security footage from our cameras. It was all there. The man's car driving by our house, pulling into the driveway, and then trying to run over my dad. They were able to track him down and arrest him that night. It turned out that the man had been stalking me for weeks. He had followed me home from work a few times and had gone through our trash. He had a history of violent behavior and had been in and out of jail for years. I couldn't believe that someone like that had been coming into the diner where I worked, watching me and making me feel so uncomfortable. I had always thought of myself as a strong, independent person who could handle anything, but this showed me that there are some things in life that are beyond our control. The man was eventually sentenced to prison for what he did to me and my family. I never saw him again, but the memory of what happened stayed with me for a long time. It wasn't easy, but eventually I found a job at a bookstore in a neighboring town. It was a quieter job, with less interaction with strangers. I felt safe there, and it helped me heal from the trauma of what happened before. For context, I'm a male. The story takes place in the summer of 1998 in a satellite town just outside Atlantic City, New Jersey. This was my 8th grade summer going into my freshman year of high school. That summer, my mom and dad were having our first family house built, so we were actually living with my older brother and my sister-in-law. So I was without very much parental supervision a lot of the time during those months. I had a lot of freedom during that time, and I would ride my bike just about everywhere, no matter the distance, and my curfew was really non-existent. My mom was getting older, and since I was the youngest of 4 siblings, she wasn't too keen on picking me up after a long day at work. Plus, she was staying at my older sister's house during this time, and it was 15 minutes away from my brother's place. So she would get really annoyed if she had to come and pick me up in the middle of the night. Sometimes she would just tell me, "If you got there on your bike, then you can get home on your bike. That being said, I would typically ride my bike to my friend Chris's house every weekend, which was about 10 or 15 minutes away from my brother's. If you're not familiar with southern New Jersey, or the areas surrounding Atlantic City, then you should know that they were very heavily wooded areas. There was a lot of rural and half-suburbanish style neighborhoods. So for instance, you could be in a dense neighborhood of houses one second, and the next you could be in the middle of the forest, with barely any houses or streetlights. It was weird. One night at around 9:30, I believe it was a Sunday night, my mom called Chris's house and wanted me home ASAP. It was getting late, and she wanted me home before she went to bed. She definitely wasn't coming to get me, because it would take her too long. She was a lenient but also very worrisome mom, if that makes sense. She knew I was capable of handling myself, but obviously, she would still worry about me a lot. She knew I could handle myself, and that I was streetwise when it came to being aware of my surroundings. She made sure to teach me about stranger danger from a young age, so she really never got too afraid of me riding my bike home a little late, but sometimes she would still worry. I said goodbye to Chris and his family, and then started my 10-mile, 30 to 40-minute journey through the wooded areas and suburban neighborhoods to my brother's house. Everything was going well, and I was making good time, partly due to the abnormally chilly night that seemed to come out of nowhere. It was cold, and without a hoodie, I wanted to get home as quickly as possible. About 30 minutes into my ride, I turned onto my brother's street. It usually took me another 10 minutes to get to his house from there, mainly because it's one of the last houses on this long, dark, heavily wooded street. About a minute or so later, I saw a car turn onto the street behind me. I paid no mind to it because it was normal occurrence. But after a short while, I felt something was off with it. The headlights from the car seemed to be on 1 second, and then off the next. I also knew there weren't many houses on this street that the car would want to pull into. It was now pretty dark outside. As I looked behind me, I no longer saw the suspicious car following, but I had a gut-wrenching feeling about that car that I couldn't explain. It was like a primal fear, and it just took over my senses out of nowhere. I picked up my pace, and slowly started to notice that the car engine was faintly in the distance. And when I looked back, I saw the car behind me. It was lit up by one of the only streetlights on the street. I was certain that this guy was following me, and I was scared to death. But I didn't want to show him that I had seen him right away. He was about 500 feet, or roughly a football field or more, distance behind me. I started to pedal a lot faster, but not in a panicked type of way, as to show that I'd seen him. At that time, I took my house keys out of my pocket while pedaling. I put my longest key in between my fingers and made a fist, in case he rolled up on me and tried to grab me off my bike. I was thinking that I could at least get a good shot at his eye, or his throat, anything that would get him away from me and clear some distance between us. I was about a little more than halfway home, and during this stretch, the street was dark with almost no houses and no streetlights. I was always scared when I rode home normally, but now I was freaking out, and a million different scenarios were going through my head. He must have picked up on the fact that the road got way darker and more desolate, because he moved closer and started gaining on me, slowly and steadily. He was about 60 or 70 yards back. Because of that, I nearly started pedaling the fastest I've ever pedaled my bike in my whole life. I made it to my front yard and literally jumped off my bike and struggled to unlock the front door. He was about 30 or 40 feet behind me when I got into the door, and he was now parked directly in front of the house. I was shaking so badly when I got in the front door, and I locked it behind me. I screamed to wake up my brother, and I told him there was a car stopped in front of the house and that it was following me. My brother John sprinted out of his bedroom and ran outside to confront the guy. The car stayed there in the street, and my brother stayed in his yard with his hands up. The car then turned its lights on. It stayed in park for some reason, and it seemed like it was there for 10 minutes or more. The whole time, me and my brother felt like this dude was going to shoot us or something, because he was just stopped there on the street. By this time, I was able to get a good look at the car, but I couldn't see inside because of the dark and the tinted windows. Suddenly, the standoff ended, he did a quick 3-point turn and sped away back the way he came. I was shaken up pretty bad for a night or two, and so was my brother. This type of stuff doesn't really happen around here. Well, at least so we thought. My brother and I called the police and gave the best description we could of the vehicle, but nothing came of it. Nor did we see it around there ever again. But what's truly horrifying is that a few months later, there were a few attempted kidnappings of kids my age in the same area. The car they described matched the description from the one that we saw that night at my brother's. Thankfully, the kids got away, but the guy was never caught. I'm guessing he's still at large to this day. This happened to my best friend around 2 years ago. I'll call her Sarah for privacy reasons. We're both studying in the same city, but at different universities, so we're living in different parts of the city. One day, while Sarah was studying for her exams, she realized there was no food in her fridge, so she decided to go for a walk and get some groceries. There was a fairly large and well-supplied supermarket close to her apartment complex, where she shopped for some fruits, yogurt, and noodles. She spent about 15 minutes in the supermarket, only to be greeted by a complete stranger outside who started trying to make small talk with her. He acted like they knew each other, but Sarah was positive that she'd never met him before. Sarah was a very polite person, but also very cautious of strangers. She described him as a short, overweight guy with a goatee and a wide, odd grin on his face. On the other hand, my best friend was tall and chubby, so she was the kind of girl you would not want to mess with. She noticed that his fingers were somehow twitching while he spoke, indicating that he was nervous. The guy was at least 35 years old, and Sarah was 23 at the time. Immediately, she realized that something was wrong with this guy. First, he greeted her by saying that he'd spotted her in the area a few times, and proceeded to ask her on a coffee date. Sarah was just standing there speechless, and politely declined him by saying she wasn't interested. He got mad and insisted that she should go out with him. When she refused again, he angrily told her that they'd be seeing each other soon, calling her by her real name. She was absolutely dumbfounded by this, wondering how on earth he found out her real name. She had no clue who this guy was. He didn't seem like a university student at all, but rather a construction worker, judging by the clothes he was wearing. A bunch of questions came to her mind. She was afraid that she may have been stalked by him, so she threatened to call the police if he didn't leave her alone. Obviously, she wasn't the least bit interested in him, but if you think the story ends there, then you're wrong. The next thing she did was part ways with him. He stood in that same spot for a moment, and then as she said, he hopped in his car and started following her for a couple of blocks down the street. He had a dark-colored car with tinted windows. When Sarah realized this, she got even more scared, so she had to take a lesser-known route in order to get to her apartment complex safely. The sun was just starting to set at this point. After some shortcuts, she managed to arrive home safely before dark. She was left feeling paranoid from the whole incident, wondering whether he knew where her apartment was. She never reported the incident to the police, but she vividly remembered his facial features and overall appearance. Fortunately, nothing ever happened after that, and she's not seen the guy since. I really hope it stays so. My advice to everyone is to stay safe out there, because sadly, there are a lot of narcissistic people out there who can't take no for an answer. Hi everyone, I'm from the UK, and this happened to me back in 2015. It was one night during the early hours, around 2 a.m. I decided to get some cash from an ATM in my supermarket, which was 10 or 15 minutes away. I was walking down there, and it was a quiet night. Some house lights were on, and there were people drinking or probably having a late night snack, or whatever. I would have to arrive 2 or 3 street blocks before I arrived at the supermarket. When I got to the ATM, I saw 4 or 5 guys all acting weird. At first I thought they were just doing stupid things. Then I pulled out my card to withdraw some cash. One of the guys walked over to me. He was tall with a gray top, and he was quite built, with dark hair. He said,
"Don't look at me."
I said, "What? I don't even know you. I'm just doing my thing over here, and then I'm gone." Then he said,
"Don't effing look at me."
His friends laughed, and one of the other guys said,
"Yeah? What are you doing?" "You heard. He said don't look at him."
There were 3 others. The other I remember had ginger hair and a beard, and the other 2 I can't remember. I quickly got my cash and walked away at a fast pace. At the back of the store, there was an alley and a footpath that led back to my housing estate in the cul-de-sac. When I got out of there, they came after me. The first 2 I encountered said,
"What are you saying, mother effer? Give me your stuff."
Then his friend started laughing. Then I saw one of them pull out what looked like a long blade. I did carry a rolling pin for protection, though this is taking a rolling pin to a knife fight. What are the odds, right? I bolted fast through the alley and had to decide between garages or someone's garden to hide. I chose the front garden covered by trees and bushes, and also a garden chair and a canopy, so I felt somewhat safe. Then I heard one of them say,
"Yo, where did he go?"
The other one said,
"You, check the garages. I'll check the roads. He has to be close."
Then the other one said,
"Nah, man's up here." If it was me, I would have gone to those garages, or the roads.
I found it sort of amusing as they searched the garages. They then said,
"Yo, he's gone. I'm gonna F him up when I see him next."
I got out and ran as fast as I could down the side road, and I heard one of them say,
"There he is."
There was a small pursuit leading through the main road and other houses as I jumped some fences and ran into another alley. They lost me, and I made it to the next town, about 25 minutes away. I was thinking of letting the cops know in case I run into them again. I felt stupid, and thought the cops would probably ask me why I was out there so late. I grabbed some snacks and some drinks, since I needed to refuel my energy. I got a taxi, and had quite a conversation about how lucky I was. I probably would have been robbed and beaten, or maybe worse. I don't go out on Saturday anymore, and I go to the supermarket during the day. As for the gang that came after me, and what they did, I hope I don't have an encounter with them again.